I'm going to say something about my guest that he won't agree with. He is a hero in bold capital letters. I know that he doesn't see it that way. He feels like he just did his duty. But after hearing just 10 of his stories, I know he is a hero to hundreds of people and their families. I can't say that he is an unsung hero. The definition of an unsung hero is one who does great deeds but receives little or no recognition for them. My guest has received recognition from the city governments in both Lexington and Georgetown, Kentucky, and from the Commonwealth of Kentucky Senate for the lives he has saved. He is Firefighter Orville Cook of Georgetown, Kentucky. Orville is the most senior firefighter in the Bluegrass Region. Here in January 2023, he is 92 and will be 93 in June. I've known Orville for decades and am honored that he agreed to get together at his home in Georgetown and talk about his career in the fire service. I'm Tom Haley, and this is Bluegrass Region Voices and Views, where I talk with inspiring and creative people around the bluegrass. Orville is both of those. I believe that we need to appreciate more deeply the work of our fire service. We also need to appreciate and thank their spouses and families for their support and sacrifice. So, this is also a tribute to Orville's wife, Maddie Cook. They've been married for 43 years. I first met Maddie in 1974. Maddie, we thank you for the support you've provided Orville and the fire service. We taped this conversation in their home in Georgetown, Kentucky on Thursday, January 12th, 2023. Drop in on our conversation right after I've asked Orville where he was born and raised.
I was born and raised in Scott County in Georgetown. Went to school here. When I graduated, I didn't have a particular job, but I was like all the other kids. You did farm work. Usually it was tobacco. You housed tobacco, or you got involved in the farming some way.
And then what's your first ever memory, going all the way back as far as you can?
One of the first memories that I can recall was a train. My dad was a railroader, and the railroad track ran right behind our house in Georgetown. And I remember that noisy steam engine.
Was it scary?
It was different. I don't think it ever scared me, but it was just something different.
Sure. Yeah, that would be. What was the first job that you ever had where you actually got paid?
The first pay that I ever got was from setting tobacco. An old gentleman came by the house, and he said, "I need some help, and let me teach you how to set tobacco off of a tobacco setter." And I would try anything about that time. So
how old were you?
That I did. I was probably 12 years old.
Okay, good, yeah.
And it worked out real well.
Strong work ethic from the beginning there.
That's right.
That's great.
But all the kids, that's how they earned their money then. Mm. Things were pretty tight back in my time. Of course, I was born in the 30s.
I was going to ask, what year were you born?
I was born in 30.
In 1930, okay.
In June 20th of 1930.
Okay.
So I've seen a lot of changes.
Yeah, we'll get to some of those for sure. So as you know, we're here today in honor of you having the career that you had as a firefighter. I've known you for a long time, been impressed with you since the day we met. And I have a number of questions that I want to ask you about your days as a firefighter. When was the first thought that you ever had that you might like to be a firefighter? Was that when you were 12 years old in the tobacco field, or when did that happen that you decided that or thought that?
Years ago, there was a fellow in town here that his name was Jack Tucker. He worked at a funeral home, but he was the driver of one of the fire trucks in Georgetown. I think, if I remember correctly, the name of that truck was Old Faithful. Huh. But on some Sundays, they would the fire, all those involved in the fire department, which was not very many in Georgetown, would come out on Maddox Street at the corner of Maddox and College Street. There's a fire hydrant, and they would hook to that hydrant, and then there was a vacant lot directly across the street and backed up to the Southern Railroad, and they would put one of their master streams in place and throw water for a little while. And that's the first inkling I ever had. I said, I'd like to do that sometime.
How old were you?
And I was about 7 or 8 years old at the time.
Okay, that far back.
And I grew up right around the Southern Depot.
Okay.
In Georgetown.
Yeah.
And that was done, maybe once a month or something like that. Jack became a real good friend. I sort of worked off of that.
Well, at that age, like 7 or 8, and you had those thoughts, did you ever go visit the fire station, and did they let you sit in the truck or anything like that?
Dad would take me downtown, and I would piddle around the truck and crawl all over it and all that good stuff. But I had an uncle that the police department and the fire department were in the same building.
Okay.
And I had an uncle that was a policeman there, and he let me get by with some things that maybe somebody else wouldn't.
Things they might not let kids do these days.
That's right. Well, when we had visitors later on, and when I did get into fire service, they were number one. We took care of the children.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't ask you earlier when we were talking about your early days, but you grew up here in Georgetown, went to high school here in Georgetown. Is that right?
I went 12 years here, 12 grades.
What high school would that have
That's
been?
Garth.
Garth, okay.
There was only one Garth,
Okay.
one high school. Now, they had county schools, and each one of the county schools had basketball, but they didn't have football. Garth had football.
And I know before we started our recording here, we were looking at some pictures of your football days. I know we're here to talk about firefighting, but tell us a little bit about your football days in high school.
Well, I enjoyed that a great deal. I started out early, and I went out for football in junior high, and I had a coach that coached both high school and grades, and his name was Joe Johnson. And a lot of people here would recognize the name. And the varsity practiced on one part of the field and the junior high on the other. And one day he came down to where we were, the junior high, and he stood there and he was watching and watching and watching. And finally he came over and he said, "You come and go with me." And I was an 8th grader. And I went with him, and he went up, introduced me to the rest of the older ball players, and from that day forward, I was part of the varsity
From eighth
football
grade. Okay.
from the 8th grade.
Yeah.
But I had it was one thing I could do. I could center a football like a rocket.
Okay.
And that's what he was looking for. And I played that position up till my last 2 years, and then I was a running back from that time.
Now you're tall. How tall are you?
I'm 6'2".
6'2". Were you about 6'2" in the eighth grade?
I was about then. No, I didn't. I was still about 5'10".
Okay. Yeah.
So I was the runt of the bunch, but I held my own.
Yeah. Yeah. We got some great pictures of those days.
Yeah.
Well, when did you officially become a firefighter, and where was that?
There was Scott County itself did not have a fire service. Georgetown had the fire department, but the county, if something happened in the county, you were long gone. I mean, there was no help for you. And there was a fellow that came into this part of the country. He worked for Kentucky Utilities. His name was Dick Wall. He was from Pennsylvania, and up in that area, there was a lot of paid fire departments, private fire departments. And he brought that concept here because he saw the need for it. And I got involved with him. He bought a brand new truck, which I have pictures of. It was a L180 International 500-gallon pumper, brand new, white in color.
White, huh?
And like I said, we got pictures of that for you. And I got involved in part-time or whenever I could to help in fighting fire in the county.
At what age were you there?
And well, I had already graduated from school. I was in my 20s.
So did after you graduated from high school and before you started firefighting, started for that department, what type of work did you do, or did you go to school someplace?
I had a job with A&P.
Okay.
That's when A&P was still up and running strong, and I worked for A&P, I reckon, about 7, 8 years.
Here in Scott County?
And no, that was in Lexington. It was one of the supermarkets. I was the youngest receiver in the Louisville unit. So I did a world of ordering for the store. Okay. And A&P was big at that time.
I remember, yeah.
Big time. And, well, they were big enough that the government said they were doing too much. They were processing their own materials and putting them out, and canneries and all had their own meat cutting facilities. Government stepped in and cut them off, closed them.
Okay.
Could have done any one other, but they picked that one. Anyway, I saw that coming, and I was getting a little bit involved with this in Georgetown at the same time, and I got into some first aid training, and he was a drill captain with the Lexington Fire Department. His name was Captain Stevenson, he'd been around a while, and he and I got going and teaching together. And he was on my case. He wanted me to stop everything and come and go to Lexington Fire Department. And I told him, I don't think I could make it there, you know. He said, you can make it, you can make it. Well, he finally talked me into it. And that's how I got involved. The strange thing about this thing, there was a time when I had to have first aid, and I took a first aid course, and the state trooper from this area gave the course, and I finished up a class, an advanced first aid class, and on a Saturday night. And on a Monday morning, I was going to work at A&P. And when I got to the 3 Mile Bridge up 25, there was a wreck, 2 cars head on. I had 7 people laying in the road, not a soul to help. And I had just put that first aid kit in, well stocked.
Oh my goodness!
And it killed a small baby. It threw the baby through the window at the front. That's how hard the lick was. Mm. But the other folks, there was broken bones and so forth, and I must have been there for a good 30 minutes before a bus driver, a Greyhound bus driver, came by, and he stopped. And they seldom do that. But he saw the mess I was in. And he also had a radio. I had no way to contact anybody. And he called Lexington and he called Georgetown. They got 2 ambulances there. Tucker's came from Georgetown and Kerr's came from Lexington, and loaded these folks up. And some of them went back to Lexington, and the one that lost the baby went to Georgetown. Mm. And but with the training, just that one little bit of training, I'm sure, probably saved some lives that night or that morning. It was still dark.
And you weren't yet working for the fire department.
I was on my own.
Going to work at A&P.
I was going to A&P.
What time of day was that?
And this was about a little after 5 o'clock in the morning.
So, you know, thoughts that I'm having is that for some people that would, I don't know what the word would be, freak them out or something, and they would not want to do that again. But you wanted more of that. I don't mean more accidents, but you wanted to help people.
Late that afternoon, I came back and I went to the hospital here and talked to the folks that lost the baby. And when that bus stopped, I took the baby and put it in the bus to get it out of the weather because it was cold. It was cold. And the driver did not have to stay there that long, but he did. I got to give him credit for that. But it was one of those things that just stuck in my mind, and from that point on, I don't shake easy.
I know.
And I'm not bragging. Don't misunderstand what I'm telling you. But if you got a job to do, you do it, and you do it right.
Yeah. And how old were you that night?
Well, then I was in my 20s.
Okay. No, I have to ask too. Was anybody else on the bus, or was it the bus driver by?
Oh, there was several people on the bus.
Man, wow, what a night!
So that's the way it goes.
So then,
But that was my first encounter right after taking a Red Cross
wow,
course.
made all the difference.
Made all the difference in the world. So
then you were on the way to getting really serious, I guess, about becoming a firefighter.
The more I thought about it, and of course, Chief, he later became a chief, but he was a drill master, and he stayed on me, and he said, "You're the kind of person that I would like to see come in here." And of course, the drill masters were getting up in years too.
And what is a drill master?
He is in charge of a platoon training, second platoon or third platoon, whichever group of men. You had back in those days, you had only two platoons, first platoon and second platoon. You worked a day and you was off a day. You worked a day and you were off a day. And then later it became three platoons. And that's the way it is today, is a three platoon.
Okay.
But I think, and I've thought about it, I think Chief Steve was looking ahead. Because I ended up, when I got there, I was assigned many times to help train.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, for a while, chief drill master. And I got some pictures of that.
So what was the training like back at that time?
Training was thorough. We in the Lexington Fire Department were probably head and shoulders above most everybody else. We had some leaders that wanted to do the job right, and we followed the Oklahoma A&M Red Book courses and procedures. And when a guy went, by the time he got 6 months on, and that was intense training all the way, you were pretty safe with him. And before that, well, you had to watch what you're doing, because here's a guy you got next to you, you don't know what he's going to do.
Oh, I see what you mean now when you say you're safe. You're safe because the people around you know what they're doing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it makes all the difference in the world. And rope tying and knots and climbing and all that, that was natural to me. Fortunately, I've used it many times in saving lives.
Yeah.
But I've just been in that right place at the right time.
So, what was the first fire that you ever fought?
Oh, the first one, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember. We made so many. In Lexington, you had a section of town. It was built wrong in the first place, because you couldn't walk between two buildings, and these were residents, without rubbing your shoulders. So if you had a fire down in the bottom, and that's where these were, you didn't have a fire, you had three fires. You had the fire where it started and one on each side, unless it was seen right away. All of them had shingle roofs. Things have changed a great deal over the period of years. Now, those are all gone now. But you still got terrible problems, because now you got high-rise. you may do well in your little section, and the guy next door don't.
Mm-hmm.
So you got a problem. But when I was chief here for a short period, that's a story all its own, because I never anticipated ever being a chief here.
Here in Georgetown. Mm-hmm.
They were having some problems, and I'm skipping around.
That's all right.
I went in Fava's one day, sat down and had a sandwich. In the back of the restaurant, I saw the mayor. I went to school with him, and he finished eating. He came up and said, "Hi, Orville." Hello, and he went on and he went to the front door and he put his he put his head up against the door and just stood there. I thought he was sick. And I watched him a few minutes and I started to get up. And he turned around and he came back to me. And he said, Orville said, why don't you be our chief, fire chief? Well, I had already retired from Lexington, see. And I told him, I said, I had no intentions at all of getting back into fire service. He said, well, we need help and need it real bad. He said, you think about it. You think about it. He said, you go home and you talk to your wife. Said, you think about it and get back to me. And he started talking. He said, by the way, he said, we meet at 6 o'clock tonight. Oh, gosh. So, he gave me a whole lot of time. I came back and told Maddie. She said, why don't you do it? And I got to thinking about it. Well, it can't hurt anything. It might help some because they're in desperate need of somebody to lead it. So I ended up being chief here for a year.
You were the interim fire chief of the Georgetown Fire Department from 1996 to 1997.
Yeah, 96 and 97.
That I just read that from a printout from the Georgetown News graphic where you were honored during a fiscal court meeting in May 6, 2022. Well, I know I asked you about the first fire that you ever fought, which, that's too far back to, and there were too many of them to remember that. However, here I'm at your home here in Georgetown, and you showed me some pictures in your museum gallery on your wall of a fire that was pretty massive or pretty involved at the ice company at one time. If you wouldn't, I think you said you all were on the site for
that. The fire service was on that site 28 days.
28 days,
and it was when that alarm came in. It came in right before midnight.
And you were with the Lexington Fire Department.
I was with the Lexington Fire Department at the time, and I was off duty.
Wow.
And another platoon had the fire. And they later found that this was arson.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
It was arson. And some of the water supply had been taken loose. So you couldn't use some of your good methods, sprinkler systems and so forth. Of course, as cold as it was, it may not have worked anyway.
Yeah, how cold was it?
It was 7 below zero.
Oh, gosh.
And it was a cold, cold night. And we, like I said, we were called back on duty. And engine 3 had ice around it from the spraying, from the overspray. And it sat there 2 or 3 weeks. You couldn't get it out. It was as high as a man could see. You couldn't look over it.
Gosh.
It got into a building that was a brick building with cork insulation between the bricks. And these walls, I reckon, were close to 3 foot thick. And when they tore the building down and sent it to the dump, some of it was still burning.
Oh my gosh, that cork. Huh?
That cork got on fire, and there was no way to get to it.
Gosh.
You couldn't get to it. So, and cheese, there was a lot of government cheese. Everybody on that end of town had cheese. Tons of cheese.
Gosh.
But it was one of the coldest nights I've ever spent on a fire.
Yeah, you were telling me about the ice that would build up on you and how it would make you almost bend down to the ground.
You'd have to break it off every once in a while. You would forget that, you're busy. There was an ammonia line there that we were very concerned about because we thought it might blow. And we had lines right under. I was on one of those lines, and we've got some pictures of some of the guys on that fire.
Wow.
Here.
Well, in 2000, I'm going to jump around a little bit myself here. So in 2003, you were honored by the Kentucky Senate for rescuing a person from a burning building on Galloway Road in from a burning vehicle, I should say,
yeah.
on Galloway Road in Scott County. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, it was bedtime. I was getting ready to go to bed. And I heard a noise, and the dogs, I had some Rottweilers at the time, and they were raising Cain. And I went to the front door. The dogs were barking, but I couldn't see a thing in the world. And I closed the door, and they kept it up, and I went back and opened it again, and I saw a flicker of fire. Well, I got my shoes on and run up the driveway, and by the time I got up there, we had flame in and around the car. And this fella had hit a tree and glanced off and then hit a tree head on. And it threw him backwards and threw him down in between bucket seats. And this guy, he was a 200-pounder, pretty good-sized man. And I tried to get his door open on the driver's side. It was locked. And I run around to the other side, and it was open. And when I opened it, fire come rolling out at me. And I knew he was going to burn up. Well, that initial rollout, and then it sort of calmed down just a little bit. And I couldn't find him. He was in between those seats. And finally, I got my hands on him, and I couldn't lift him from the outside. So I crawled in, got over top of him, and picked him up and got him out from between the seats. And got him to the outside and drug him on down to the edge of the road. And by that time, the vehicle was totally in fire. And we were both lucky, and it was just one of those things that you do it. You don't question. You don't answer to nobody. You just do it.
Yeah. And you were retired at that time?
I was retired at that time, yeah. Yeah.
Well,
and he lived. He got all right.
Was he burned pretty badly?
He was burned some, but not bad. And how he wasn't, I don't know. And how I did not get burned that bad. And it was we were just lucky.
Well, over the course of your career, how many times have you been burned?
Oh my!
Really? that many.
I most of the time, we had pretty good equipment. If you got your hands burned or something like that, it's your fault because you didn't have gloves on. We were looking through. I was treated several times at the hospital, overcome by toxic fumes or something other than that. Heat. I was lucky enough to survive it, but we got some people out of some bad situations. Until NASA came into being, the fire service was in poor condition for breathing apparatus. It shouldn't have been that way, but it was. And they had some antique. It would take you 10 minutes to get a particular unit functioning properly. Damage is already done. 10 minutes with fire is a long time. When NASA came into being, MSA masks came into being, and some of the Scott came into being, and those masks and all were, breathing device, I should say, were excellent. But when I went in the fire department, there was only 2 what they called 15-minute tanks that you had. It was a little green tank about 4 inches in diameter and about that long, about 18 inches long. And there was one on the EMS, and there was one on the chief's car, and the rest of them was were the old style type, canister type. Couldn't depend on them. But when NASA came in, here come the good equipment, and it saved a bunch of people. No doubt, it saved a whole lot of firefighters later on down the line, because you get into situations sometimes that you've got to have some air. That's all there is to it. Right. But yet you got to go get somebody if you know they're in. We had a strange situation at one point in time. We went into a house that had a commercial refrigerator in a regular house. How they got there, I don't know. Didn't ask. But it was an ammonia fed, and it had been there forever. And it had maybe you'd seen one somewhere along the line. It had the motor and all on top of it. And we were trying to get it out of the building, out of the house, and it went through the floor. And when it went through the floor, there was 3 of us behind it, and got our legs into the floor with it, and we never got out. 2 of the guys retired from it.
Right, because of that incident.
It scarred their lungs so bad.
Oh, my.
And I laid there and coughed the whole winter. And eventually got by it, got past it. But it'd like to kill me. And that's the way it goes. Everything turned out in the long run, but it took a long time. NASA was our lifesaver.
Okay. Wow. Well, besides that incident where your legs went through the floor with the refrigerator, are there some other times when you thought that you might not make it?
I didn't let that bother me.
Okay.
I'm not cutting you short.
Yeah.
Where there's a will, there's a way. Okay. If you're properly trained and those that are responsible for seeing that this training is done and done right, most of the time you're you're going to be in a safe situation.
Okay. Wow.
Sometimes you stretch it out a little, but that's the way it goes. I've talked to a lot of people out of suicides in my time.
Tell me about that.
And I've got a picture of one I'll show you a little later. Over to University of Kentucky, a student had gone out and was hanging on a drain pipe, and I talked him down because I went to him.
So you say you went to him, in other words, you climbed up.
I climbed up, and I had a rope on me
where you could make eye contact.
Yeah, I went over the top and down to him. So, but we got some pictures of him.
Okay.
And I eventually used a little psychology on him. I told him after he was bound and determined he was going to jump, I said, "Well, you're not very far off the ground." I said, all you're going to do is break up a few bones, and you're going to end up in the hospital and lay up for months, hurting. And it worked.
Wow. Good move. Good move.
But anyway, that was just one of many.
Do you have some idea how many people's lives your work probably saved over the years?
I wouldn't know.
Okay.
I really wouldn't.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people that I had contact with.
Yeah.
The most talked about or thought about was a situation where they were digging a ditch and putting in a sewer line. And this ditch was sometimes 25 and 30 feet deep, a massive dig. And just about closing time, the bell hit, and it said they had a cave-in. And I made the run. And when I got there, the first company was closer to them, and there was two guys. One of them was a boss, and his helper was at the end of this cave-in, and they were being dug out by that first crew. And this guy told the boss turned around and told me, he said I got a man underneath. And I said, well, how far? He said, I don't know. He was ahead of us. Well, I immediately started walking the cave-in, and couldn't see a thing. And finally got up. There must have been 125, 30 feet long, at least, of cave-in. And this, we're talking about deep. There was a backhoe sitting there. And there was a fella that had been running that backhoe. I told him, I said, get on that backhoe. I said, we're going to try to find this man. It had been an hour and 5 minutes, and this man's underground. Chances are you're not going to save him. And he got on, and he started shaking, and he come off of there. And he come up to me, and he said, Mister, he said, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. Well, I immediately got on the radio, and I called the alarm room. which is at number 1 station. And I told him, I said, send me Quinn Gray. I knew that we had 2 guys that either one of them, he could pick your teeth with a backhoe.
Wow.
They're that good. Well, they shot him across town with escorts and everything else. And when he got there, I told him, I said, Gwen, I said, get on this, and I'm going to go up here and watch you. I said, you take it about 2 to 3 inches at a time. And he made 3 passes, and he pulled up hair.
Wow. Pulled up air, meaning a gap. Oh, pull up hair.
Hair.
I thought you...
Man, we jumped in there with shovels.
Wow.
Done been over the iron 5 minutes.
Yeah.
We dug down, and that man is alive today.
Oh, gosh.
And we like to never got him out. And we dug and dug and dug, and you could only dig so far with a backhoe, because when you stuck a backhoe in, it put pressure on him.
Mm.
And it all had to be done practically by hand. We dug down, got him down to the waist. He was alive. We got him some water. We had a little cave in. We dug it out, got it away from him, and we built a box. Let me back up a little bit. I called back the alarm room. I told them, I said, send me every carpenter you got. And the fire department's full of carpenters. Lexington is. I mean, there's a whole lot of men there. Mm-hmm. I said, send me every carpenter you got, all the plywood, drywall you got, plywood you got, and 2x4s and 2x6s. I said, we've got to brace this wall. Arthur Rupert was an assistant chief, and he was at the drill tower, and they had 20 men going through training, and he heard the call, and he loaded all those guys, and they run to 1 and loaded that truck and come on. 4 o'clock the next morning, we got him out of the ground.
4 o'clock. Are you in touch with him today at all?
No.
No, yeah. Maybe he'll hear this.
I never... Arthur Rupert made contact with him several times. The guy that brought the guys, but I never tried.
Well, it'd be neat if the 2 of you could get together someday.
Yeah, but he unheard of.
Wow,
unheard of. I want to tell you one that's hard to believe, but I was there and I know it happened. We had a captain. His name was Walker, Charlie Bill Walker. He played ball. He was a center for Barry Bryant. And he was also in the military, the reserve. And he was my captain on Engine 1 when I was transferred to Engine 1. Finest guys you ever saw. He had to go to the military camp. And he was having trouble. He had to have a doctor sign off so he could go. Well, he was having trouble meeting up with that doctor. Anyway, he found out that he was down on Patterson Street. So he got on the buggy. That's the first aid squad.
Okay.
I was driving that. I was on that unit, assigned to it at that time. And we picked up an extra guy who was Tiny Wells was the guy, in case we got a run while he was in talking to the doctor. That way we were covering all bases. Because he had to get this thing signed because he left the next morning at about 7 o'clock for reserve. Well, he goes in and we wait. we didn't get a call, so he came back out and got in the truck. And this Tiny Wells is always agitating. He's an agitator anyway. And all for the good, you know. And Captain Walker said he hit Tiny on the back, and he said, 12 more hours, and said, I'm going to be out of here for 2 weeks. He said, y'all can have it. And Tiny Wells said, ain't no rest for you tonight. No rest for you tonight. He said, Walcott's going to come in tonight. Well, we had been doing pre-attacks on different buildings, warehouses, feed mills, all that kind of stuff. You're constantly training through drawings and layouts of what you would do if that came in, if that particular building came in. Charlie Bill, I remember him hitting him on the back and said, hush, boy. We went back to the station, and at 12:01, the bell hit. And what was it? Walcott Flour Mill. Well, when we went out of the station, you didn't see an address. You didn't need it. It was on fire all over. Mm. Now, that happened. I'm telling you, I saw it. I lived it. Mm-hmm. And it, when Chief got down to within a block of it, he called alarm room and said, send everything you got. Mm. We threw 2.5 million gallons of water from 12:01 to 6 o'clock the next morning. Hmm. And when it hit those elevators, it came out like a blowtorch, blue flame. We had 8 or 10 guys, scalded feet through their boots. I was telling Maddie, and it was 2 or 3 of those guys that were burnt pretty bad. Hmm. But it was arson. They eventually found out who it was. But that guy called that right on the barrelhead. It had to be an accident, but it's strange how it worked.
Was the one that you all studied?
That's the one that we had the pre-attack on.
That is incredible.
It is. It's just unreal. And we had people come from Paris and Cynthiana and all. I had one guy, now I don't know whether to take him at his word or not. I have no idea. We got a little bit of a break and relief. We got other companies coming in, call back. And this one guy, he said, I'm from Paris. I'm from Cynthiana. And he said, I could read a newspaper.
Is that light?
That light.
Oh, my gosh.
He said, I could read a newspaper in Cynthiana. Now, I don't know whether to believe it or not. I know it lit up everything around.
Well, you mentioned that you told your wife, Maddie, about it. I wanted to ask you about Maddie. I understand from one of the newspaper articles I read about you where you gave her a lot of praise for her support over the years. Would you want to give her what I think people these days call a shout-out?
Maddie has been my right arm. She has supported me. She supported the fire service and the people involved 100%. And anybody need anything, all you had to do is, sometimes you didn't even have to say it. Mm-hmm. She just did it. Yeah. if it's feed them, be with them, sickness, no matter what. And she supported me teeth and toenail from day one.
And how long have you been married now?
43 years. Yeah.
Wow.
You don't always find that where the demand is so great. In the fire service, it is great.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go when things are not always the best.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the name of the game. You don't question it. It's a great profession, but you better know what you're doing.
Hmm. And how can one be sure they know what they're doing?
Get the best training that you can possibly get. The best. And it's essential that you do that. Never did I expect to be riding a buggy. I say buggy, that's a first aid squad.
Mm-hmm.
That word is misused a great deal. In the olden times, the buggy was the buggy that the chief was drawn in, taken to the fire in.
Oh.
But somewhere along the line, terminology changed a little bit on those first aid runs, and it was called a buggy.
Okay.
But like I said, it's sort of misused.
Yeah.
It's a first aid squad is what it is.
Okay.
I rode it at an early age, and I did a whole lot at an early age in the fire service itself, because I suppose of some of the training I had prior to going in.
Yeah.
If it matched Lexington's methods, then and it did, because everybody I had dealt with was from Lexington.
Okay.
Northern Kentucky Fire School. We involved about 8 or 10 of us set up the first Northern Kentucky State Fire School. And I taught rescue in it.
Gosh.
And always something.
Well,
Anything. I'm a guy that if I can teach you something that'll save a life, I'm going to do it. Rope, I'm a whiz bang with rope.
Yeah.
It's natural, and you use it a lot. I took a guy off of a water tower. I don't know whether you knew that or not.
No, I did not. No.
We used 186 feet of rope, I think it was. The water tower that's just west of Rupp Arena.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy got sick that was redoing that tank. And he was in the tank, and he was overcome, and one of his fellows found him. And we were called, and we went up, or I went up. Well, both of us went up. The guy that was riding with me was a little older fellow. But anyway, we had to get that man to the ground. And an off-duty firefighter came by after he was on top of the tank, and Jess Beckett. And Jess had gone to Northern Kentucky with me. He worked with me in rescue. So he was there, and I tied a rope which was a saddle, on the man. Now, a lot of people tie a saddle and you step into it and then you come up half hitch around it and then go. Well, I tied it different. This guy comes to, and he looked at me, and he said, "I ain't never seen no damn knot like that." I said, "Well, you and I going to ride that to the ground." And he passed out again. And then I tied the same knot and tied us together. I'm not the greatest guy in the world on ice, but I'll do it if I have to. And we took him over that tank, and that's a feeling all its own when there's nothing behind you.
Hmm.
And I took him down and dropped him to the catwalk that goes around that tank. And then had to bring him around quarter ways and then straight down. But I'll never forget that. I ain't never seen no damn knot like that. And I said, "Well, you and I going to ride it." And that was another one of those things that don't everybody do.
Yeah. Well, there's one I know that you did that I don't know that it had ever been done before, and hopefully it's not been done since. And that was out at the concrete plant at Avon when I was working there at Pre-Stress Services, which is where I met your wife, Maddie, in 1974. But we had a little incident out there, and if you would tell us a bit about that.
Well, a lot of times fellows do things that the best that they know how to do, but sometimes they don't know how to do. In a situation like that where you've got loose material, it can be in a tank or box or whatever. If you open the bottom and try to get this guy out, you're going to kill him.
Well, let me say, because I didn't complete my thought on that, I guess. So what happened, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, we had a guy that fell into the cement bin.
That's right.
And for people who don't know, cement is not concrete. Cement is this powdered material that is used mixed with water and other admixtures to make concrete. So it's the way I thought about it, and it might be a bit of an exaggeration, but it's almost like falling into talcum powder.
You're exactly right.
Okay.
You're exactly right. But you can take corn, or you can take wheat grain and do it. It's the same situation, and you can't pull them out. You can't pull him out. You'll kill him.
And what I was thinking about the cement too is that since it's such a powdered form, you're inhaling it, getting it into your lungs.
The more that you stir it up, the worse it is. If you can get a rope around that person and cinch it above him and hold him, then let the material run away from him. Is your best bet in getting a guy out like that, because a lot of times, and they've tried it before, is to open the bottom and let him go through, and you got bones.
Yeah.
And but this worked out in the long run. It worked out. When I got there, I was called on a special on that one, and because that was not my district, and I hustled on out there, and when I got there was a fellow that had a torch, and he was cutting the bottom, and I stopped him. And he didn't like that. Well, I don't care if he's boss or not boss. If I know for a fact that he's going to kill that man, he's not going to do it.
Right.
Okay. And as soon as the ranking officer is on the scene, he's in charge. Period.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way it works. And we got ropes and got around this guy, and where he couldn't sink anymore. And then you open the bottom and let it run away from him.
Okay.
Another way to do that, and some places have it, they have stays, wooden staves that they have just in case something like that happens, that they drive staves around, and you got a barrel around him. You follow me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's another way to do it. Well, we didn't have staves, but we were bound to determine to hold him steady and let the material run away from him.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I know, he's alive today.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's just another.
Well, so you have had quite the career. We're coming up on the time limit that I try to keep my podcast to. Let me ask you this. So then, when did you retire?
85.
85. Okay. All right. Well, once you retired, since you've retired, what types of projects have you enjoyed being involved with?
Oh, I've always liked it. Give me some time to hunt. I had some friends that, sorry to say, most of them are gone now. They're dying off on me. But there was 5 of us that had, together, we went in and bought a right good sized farm, and most of them's gone.
Okay.
So we had to end up selling it. I couldn't take care of it myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was blessed with good health for a long, long time. I was a strong person, and I woke up one morning and I had a tremendous pressure on my chest. And I'd been around long enough to know what's going on. And I called the alarm room here in Scott County. I lived on Galloway. And when I called EMS, it happened to be a guy that I had worked with was now in charge of EMS here in Georgetown. And I told him hard. I said, I'm having a heart attack. And I said, I need help right away. And he said, well, stay where you are. I said, now look. I said, I got a 125-pound Rottweiler in the house. And I said, you're not going to get close to me. I said, now I'm going to stay where I am on the bed until you get a unit down the driveway. And then I'll put the dog out back. And that's what I did. I waited till they got down the driveway. And I put the dog out back and went to the front door, and there was one of the guys was already to the door. I went over and sat down and coded right then.
Right then.
And they got me back. And after a lot of work, they took me into the hospital, and I coded twice there. and they got me back. And I've always felt that there was a reason. And some of this other stuff, the year here at Georgetown, maybe that was some of it. Pass on a little info.
Yeah.
I've been blessed.
Well, here's how.
Maddie has watched me like a hawk and keep me straight.
Yeah. Well, you look very healthy. You're 92 now, I think you said.
Like I said, I'm for a 90-year-old, I'm blessed.
You are 92 now, is that right?
Yeah.
Or not 90? Yeah. Wow.
I was 92 in June.
June,
Got
okay.
another one coming up here shortly.
Okay. Well, I always close my podcast with what I call Bluegrass Region highlights, where I'll ask you a couple questions about local things in the area. But before we do that, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that I haven't brought up?
I don't know of anything right offhand. I've got this material that you're welcome to, or anybody else. You're welcome to it at any time. You can see it or look at it.
Great.
It might be of interest to you. I suppose that's about it.
Okay, well, fine. Well, so Bluegrass Region highlights, I asked these two questions. What's your favorite coffee shop or restaurant in the area that you like to go to and hang out, if there is one? And then the second question is, what's a favorite venue or activity that you like to visit or do here in the Bluegrass region? So especially like if you had somebody coming in from out of town, is there something you'd like to take them to show off? So first question, what's your favorite coffee shop or restaurant around here?
My favorite was Michael's in Irvin.
In Irvin, okay.
And they closed it.
Okay.
That was open for years and years. Local, I suppose it'd be Fava's. That's usually the coffee stopover.
Yeah, you're the second guest that I've had that's mentioned Fava's, and I've not been there, but I am going to definitely be going to Fava's soon.
Well, so. That's over 100 years old.
Right downtown Georgetown,
right
Kentucky.
Down Georgetown, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what's a favorite venue or activity that you like to visit or do or take somebody to visit?
What I liked, and I just lost, I like gospel music. And I just lost my friend. He was a world-renowned piano player. And he, young man, and passed away. Had a tremendous future.
What's his name? What was his name?
Jeff Stice.
Jeff Stice, okay. Did he have any CDs out or anything?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a world of them.
Well, I'll find a link to his website or material, and I'll put that in the show notes.
I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. I know that this is something new for me. It might not come over too well, but it's fact.
I appreciate your friendship. I've known you since mid-'70s and have always been impressed with you, but didn't know your full story. And that's one of the reasons that I'd like doing a podcast is I know a lot of people that I'm very impressed with. They're inspiring and they're creative. But, we don't really get to know people unless we sit down and have a somewhat of an in-depth conversation. And that's what we've done today. So this has meant a lot to me, and I'm sure it's going to mean a lot to the people that listen to it as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate you, Orville.
I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'll close by saying this to Orville and Maddie. You are appreciated and loved here in Central Kentucky. Thank you for all you've done and will continue to do for our community. Show notes with pictures and links are on my website at Bluegrass Region voicesandviews.com. Thanks for listening, and thank a firefighter when you have an opportunity.